Hi, and welcome to Empower Me Nutrition Stepping Stone number 1, your gut microbiome. During this stepping stone, you'll learn how to address and manage your gut microbiome to optimize your health and reduce your unpleasant GI symptoms. So first, why would you want to reset your gut microbiome? The most typical reasons are obvious signs of bacterial overgrowth, such as gas, burping, flatulence, bloating, and diarrhea. Other signs of GI issues that might be related to your gut microbiome include nausea, GI pain, reflux, and even just a bad taste in your mouth. You may also be interested in resetting your gut microbiome if you have been told that you have IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, or you simply have GI symptoms that your healthcare providers have not been able to help you resolve, nor attribute them to a specific diagnosis and treatment. So you might be looking to think outside the box as to how you could improve your gut health. First, you should absolutely have a full GI workup by a healthcare provider to rule out potentially very dangerous um, reasons for your GI symptoms, such as a GI blockage, for example. So we definitely want you to go through the traditional GI workup and rule out potentially factors or conditions that could be addressed through the traditional healthcare system. Empower Me provides you with a comprehensive approach to explore root causes of symptoms that you simply haven't been able to address with your traditional healthcare provider. And we're helping you to identify those root symptoms and addressing likely contributing factors underlying your GI symptoms, one step at a time. So let's talk a little bit about your GI tract and associated systems. So your GI tract interacts with many other physiological organs and systems, and it's really a very complex environment. Interestingly, the number of microbial cells in your gut actually outnumber your own GI cells. So it's important to think that addressing the microbiome and the microbes will have a really big impact on the entire system. If you were to spread out the absorptive surface of your GI tract, it would be about the size of a tennis court, and on that tennis court would live a few pounds of bacteria as well as viruses and yeast. Your GI tract is like a tube that runs through your body, from your mouth, through your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, and then out through your anus. On the other side of that tube that runs through your body is the biggest part of your immune system called your GALT, or your gut-associated lymphoid tissue. These immune cells are surveilling the border since the lining of your GI tract is such a big surface area. Your GI tract and associated organs like your liver, gallbladder, and pancreas, and other systems like your immune system and your neurological system form a very dynamic, interrelated, multi-dimensional ecosystem, and the microbes are at the center of it. Importantly, the bacteria are supposed to play their role at the very end of the GI tract in the colon, but sometimes they creep up and go to other parts of your GI tract. So sometimes this complex organism and ecosystem becomes out of balance and dysregulated, which may be due to factors such as sluggish gut motility, frequent use of antibiotics, inadequate digestive processes, some medications, a food-borne illness, and poor diet, unhealthy style of eating, and also poor oral or dental health. Abdominal surgery is another factor, and for women, imbalances in the vaginal flora can also impact the gut flora as they do interact, and the origin of changes in the vaginal flora may include such factors as IUD placement. In the GI tract, the imbalance and dysregulation can manifest as overgrowth of bacteria, too many cells, basically, growth of bacteria or related microbes called archaea in the GI tract where they don't belong. They can creep up from the colon, as I mentioned, to the small intestine, and an imbalance of the types of microbes. There are hundreds and hundreds of different strains, and each produce different chemicals as part of their own metabolism. Some promote health and some are more pathogenic or harmful, especially when some of these more pathogenic microbes tend to take over and become more numerous than the health-promoting microbes. This can result in a variety of gastrointestinal symptoms noted above: the diarrhea, constipation, nausea, gas, bloating, etc. The microbes in our gut need food just like all organisms, and we are the provider of that food. They eat what we eat. Humans can't digest the fiber that comes with plant foods from the cell walls of plants. So when we eat fiber, it travels down the GI tract and becomes the fuel supply for the microbes because they are able to digest it, as well as some other carbohydrates that are resistant to our digestion. When the microbes digest the fiber, they use a fermentation process, which also results in the production of gas. So excess microbes means excess gas, and therefore bloating, burping, and flatulence, as well as pain. We, our cells, don't produce gas. The gas they produce can increase pressure in our abdomen, pushing contents of our stomach upwards. Since bacterial overgrowth is also associated with inflammation, and the combined increased pressure and inflammation can weaken the muscle ring that is supposed to keep contents of the stomach from going up to the esophagus. This allows for reflux, the acidic contents of the stomach going up into the esophagus. And this can be quite painful and can damage the tissue in the esophagus. So why do some people get overgrowth of bacteria and growth in places where the microbes don't belong, like the small intestine? In other words, why do they sometimes creep up from the colon? There are a few common reasons or contributing factors. One factor is slow movement and flow along the intestines. Sluggish thyroid function, which can be also a result of micronutrient deficiencies. Excessive stress can ultimately cause a decrease in metabolic rate, which is also related to thyroid function. Poorly controlled diabetes, leading to high blood sugars, can impact nerves that control motility and therefore cause sluggish motility along the GI tract, or even something as simple as inadequate dietary fiber and poor hydration. Diverticulosis, or pockets forming along the GI tract, can also interrupt flow. Forward flow is important because it prevents backward movement. So if we have appropriate flow through the GI tract towards the large intestine and the colon, it's harder for microbes to creep upwards. Now let's consider another factor, that being pH or acid-base balance along the GI tract, which does vary by design. The stomach environment is acidic, as is the beginning of the small intestine, and this helps prevent bacterial growth in this area. Further along the small intestines and the colon, the environment becomes more neutral or slightly basic. Some medications reduce stomach acid production, and this creates a more favorable environment for microbes higher up in the GI tract and can contribute and facilitate their creep. Other factors that can introduce bacteria or can impact flow include abdominal surgeries. There can also be an imbalance of bacteria. So I mentioned that there's a few pounds of them living in our GI tract, but there's over hundreds of different species of bacteria, many, many, many different kinds. It's a very diverse environment, and the relative populations of health promoting and not health promoting can be thrown off balance. So if you need to take antibiotics, that can kill off some of the bacteria, and the bacteria live by adhering to the lining of our GI tract. So if some of them get killed off, it basically opens up some real estate along the GI tract. And just like when we're trying to grow a nice grassy lawn, when there are open patches, the weeds seem to take over, right? The pathogenic bacteria just seem to get there faster and grow and populate, and we can get an imbalance in the different types of microbes. So there might be an overgrowth, there might be an imbalance in the kinds of bacteria there, and the bacteria might be growing in places where they don't belong. There are other factors that can contribute to GI symptoms that I just mentioned briefly, but they'll be discussed in future stepping stones. Remember, it's important to see a physician to rule out other causes of these GI symptoms that can be dangerous if not treated. You can share the strategies that we're going to discuss with your physician and registered dietitian so it can be integrated with other aspects of your health care. So how can we at Empower Me Nutrition help you resolve your GI symptoms? Let's get to the strategies to managing your gut microbiome. There are 3 initial steps to do that. First, we want to starve them, then we want to expose them, and then we want to exterminate many or most of the unwanted microbes, especially those that are living where they don't belong. After these 3 initial steps, we want to facilitate a repopulation of the health-promoting commensal microbes. We will discuss more potential underlying factors and strategies as you progress along your journey and hop over to other stepping stones. But we have found this approach to give people the most benefit up front in resolution of symptoms. In regards to the supplements I'm going to mention next, it is recommended that you review this plan with your physician and/or registered dietitian, especially if you are taking medications. Now, not all physicians and registered dietitians are trained in this area, but by sharing information you are learning with them, you should be able to integrate the different aspects of your health care and optimize your health. So the first thing we have to do is starve them. Remember, the bacteria that live in our gut eat what we eat. We are their source of nutrition. So the bacteria eat the fermentable carbohydrates that we eat, but don't digest and absorb high up in our GI tract. So these carbohydrates flow down to the lower small intestine and large intestine and colon and become fuel for the microbes. So if we follow a low fermentable carbohydrate diet, we limit their food supply. We start to starve them, which then weakens them. This is typically referred to as a low FODMAP diet, and FODMAP refers to fermentable, oligo, monosaccharides, and polyols. Basically, these are different types of fermentable carbohydrates. This style of eating is fairly restrictive and honestly hard to follow. However, it's really a key part of this strategy, and our goal is to help you reintroduce many of the healthy foods that are high in fermentable carbs. The goal is not to stay on this restrictive diet, but to embrace it for a period of time while we get to the next few steps. And then in the second stepping stone, we help you to reintroduce foods so your diet wouldn't have to be so restricted or limited. So it is a means to an end, and it will be one of the key steps in helping you to resolve your symptoms and feel better. I use the low FODMAP Bullseye Food Guide to organize foods and help you develop a low FODMAP healthy eating style. This guide puts foods into one of 6 food groups. So up on top, we have the grain and starch group. Then to the right, we have the fruit group, followed by the vegetable group, fat group, the protein group, and milk and yogurts. The inner circle of each of these 6 food groups, the green section, are the healthiest foods within each of the groups that are also low in fermentable carbohydrates. We want these to make up the majority of your diet while you're following the low FODMAP eating style. The yellow section includes foods that are low in fermentable carbohydrates, but of average nutritional quality. So you can have some of them while you're following the low FODMAP style of eating, but they're not the powerhouses of nutrition. And then the foods in the red outer circle are our foods that are generally not healthy for anybody, and also the foods that are high in fermentable carbs that are really important for you to avoid. So again, the idea is not that you stay or live on this low fermentable carbohydrate diet. We will walk you through the entire journey along the stepping stones that will allow you to heal your gut and reintroduce foods, but that's a little bit further along in our journey. For now, I just want you to realize that this diet can be challenging, but it's not forever. It's an important step, though, to follow. It will be easiest if you can eat most of your foods at home during this time and keep your meals on the simple side. But we'll share more of that as we go. So now we have the low FODMAP Bullseye Food Guide chart. This chart provides more detailed information that will help you. So here we have each of the 6 food groups I just mentioned, separated into rows. The foods in each food group that are the healthiest and low in fermentable carbohydrates are in the green column. The foods that are low in fermentable carbohydrates but moderately healthy are in the yellow. And then the foods that are generally unhealthy but yet low in fermentable carbs are in that darker red section. And you can have them to some extent, some amount, but they're not the healthiest, and they're not going to really contribute to healing your gut and getting better. So we really want you to limit those foods in the darker red section. Now the foods in the last column, the lighter red section, are foods that you might think are healthy, and in general they are considered healthy, but they are very high in fermentable carbohydrates. So while we're trying to starve the bacteria, the goal is to avoid these. Eventually, we will help you again to work many of these foods back into your diet, but it's really important to avoid them during the starve the bacteria phase. So that light red, that last column that is light red, we want to avoid. Now let's look at the different the different rows. So for the fruit group, there is a nice variety of fruits that you can enjoy while following the low FODMAP diet. So for example, berries and melons. I give you an idea what is considered a swap or a unit if you are interested in also trying to control the calories you consume. Honestly, this style of eating is rather restrictive, so we don't usually have to weigh and measure the foods. But there will be a sample menu up on the Empower Me nutrition website that will refer to daily menus that are built by taking number of swaps from different food groups for each meal and snack. So let's for now just review the foods that we want to be making up the most of our diet and those that we want to be avoiding. So I mentioned the fruits in that green section that are the healthiest. The yellow, really want to try to limit or avoid canned fruits or fruit juices. And in that red section, the fruit punches or fruits in heavy syrup. And really important to avoid those fruits in the outer circle like apples, mangoes, pears, peaches, and dried fruits and fruit juice. Bananas also need to be avoided. Next, we have the vegetable row. The foods that you can avoid that are low in fermentable carbs are in the green, such as green beans and zucchini, carrots and kale. The yellow, tomato sauce and vegetable juice are okay. They're relatively low, and you can try to include those foods. Everyone's a little different. Some people feel that those are a little acidic and bother them, especially if you're suffering with some degree of reflux. And then in that darker red section, we have deep fried vegetables, um, the ones that are in the green section, but deep fried, so prepared in an unhealthy way. So they tend to be lower in fermentable carbs, but they're just not healthy. So we want to avoid those. And then the healthy vegetables that we need to avoid for this time period, but we will try to reintroduce, include things like asparagus, beets, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and especially, and what I really want you to note is the garlic and onion. They tend to be very problematic, cause a lot of symptoms, and it's really important to avoid them during this starve the bacteria phase. Next, we have the protein row. In our first green column, we have eggs, fish, chicken, turkey. Those are all fine, and eat those with no problem. The nut butters I include here, as well as firm tofu, tempeh, and drained canned chickpeas. Soybeans you typically find frozen or fresh, and lentils. So those plant-based foods, the nut butters, tofu, tempeh, and beans, they're so healthy that we do list them here, but you need to try them in very, very small amounts. For example, the chickpeas and the soybeans and the lentils, maybe a tablespoon sprinkled on a salad. You can try just avoid large amounts of those, and preferably stick with your chicken, turkey, fish, and egg whites. You can also easily, from a FODMAP perspective, come into the yellow section for the protein group and enjoy some lean beef, lean veal, lean pork, and lactose-free cheeses like lactose-free cottage cheese and lactose-free other cheeses, preferably low-fat. Okay, next in the dark red area of the protein row, we have foods that you would generally think are not healthy: fried chicken, hot dogs, luncheon meats, ribs, higher fat cuts of beef, and regular cheeses. And then in that light red section, we have foods that really need to be avoided that are especially breaded. So like meat or poultry or chicken, for example, fish that are breaded, we need to avoid because the breading is likely made from gluten, and you'll see in the next part of this chart, we need to avoid gluten. So breaded meats are poultry, fish are not allowed in this style of eating, and then larger amounts of legumes we would want to avoid, as well as hummus. So now we have the second part of this chart, which includes the fat group, milk and yogurt group, and grains and starches. So the fat group is that first row, and in the green section we have olive oil, avocado oil, or peanut oil, and some nuts in very small amounts, just like the beans. Nuts and nut butters are okay in small amounts, but they do have some fermentable carb, so you want to try just a few nuts and see how that goes and avoid large amounts. So in terms of nut butters, I would start with about 2 teaspoons and see how that goes, and not go much higher than that, but you might enjoy a teaspoon or two on a rice cake or a gluten-free bread. Other vegetable oils in the yellow section just aren't so healthy for anybody. They're very pro-inflammatory, vegetable blend oils or seed oils, so we want to try to avoid those. Even though they are low in fermentable carbs, they're just not healthy. In the darker red section, we have mayo, margarine, and butter. Again, these foods are low in fermentable carbs, just not generally healthy. And then in the light red section, we have high-fat foods that are in the fat group that we need to temporarily avoid because they're high in fermentable carbohydrates, like avocado, cream cheese, sour cream, pistachios, cashews, and almonds. Next, we have the milk row. Basically, we need to avoid lactose, so you can have plant-based milk and yogurt products because they don't have lactose, or cow's milk or cow's milk products like yogurt that are lactose-free. And those are actually pretty easy to find. If you are using a plant-based milk, I recommend that you check the ingredient list and avoid those plant-based milks that have carrageenan or polysorbates listed in the ingredient list. These ingredients are not healthy for your gut, so you want to scan the ingredient list and avoid those ingredients. In the yellow section, we have higher fat, lactose-free cow's milk products or higher fat plant-based milk products. And then in the darker red section, we have full fat, lactose-free milk and yogurts, and sweetened milks and yogurts, and lactose-free ice cream. Again, not the healthiest. The sweetened products may cause some symptoms, so best to avoid or have in very small amounts. And the light red section in this group are consisting of products that are very high in fermentable carbohydrates, specifically cow, goat, sheep milk, soy milk. Oat milk can be problematic, as can coconut milk, and soft cheeses, regatta, sour cream, coconut milk. Okay, next we have the last row, the grain and starch group. In the green section, we have gluten-free whole grain breads and cereals and pastas, brown rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, oats, quinoa, and spaghetti squash. So a lot of variety here. And, I just highly recommend the naturally gluten-free products. So gluten-free breads, don't grow on trees. They're fairly processed foods. Whereas potatoes, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, oats, quinoa, they're minimally processed. Spaghetti squash, parsnips as well. Remember when we were talking about the beans, lentils, and soybeans, when we were talking about the protein group, we noted that they can be problematic, but to try them in small amounts if you really like them. They're in this group because in a bean or lentil, there's a fair amount of protein and a fair amount of grain and starches, so those foods appear in both groups. The yellow section includes the refined products like white rice, rice cakes, gluten-free bagels, English muffins, gluten-free crackers that are made from refined flours, so they're just not as healthy. And then in the dark red section, we have sugar. You might see that on a food label as sucrose. Artificial sweeteners, problematic for the gut all around. Maple syrup, gluten-free cookies, French fries, potato chips, or gluten-free snack chips. So these foods just aren't healthy. We're really trying to get our gut healed. So can't highly recommend these, but in small amounts they might be okay, especially if you're really looking for a sweetener. 100% real maple syrup is okay to drizzle on foods. And we all need, many people need an occasional sweet, so gluten-free cookie may help you address that sweet craving. Then in that outer or last light red column, we have products mostly that have gluten. So wheat flour, white or whole wheat bread, wheat tortillas, rye or barley. And then not because it's gluten, but peas are also highly fermentable, whether they be green or snow peas, high fructose corn syrup, beans in large amounts, those kidney beans, refried beans, or baked beans, corn Inulin is sometimes added even to yogurt. It's a common ingredient added to processed foods, so you want to check for that. Agave, molasses, soda, ketchup, honey, sugar, alcohols such as sorbitol, mannitol, and xylitol. So we want to be really careful to avoid those. A really helpful tool is a free app called Fast FODMAP. This is very helpful because it allows you to look up specific foods and it will indicate if that food is high, medium, or low in fermentable carbohydrates. The chart we just reviewed isn't all inclusive, so you might want to look up a food that you like but you didn't see in the chart. And it's very detailed. So, for example, Greek yogurt is moderate in fermentable carbs, but coconut yogurt is low. So it will help you identify foods that you're not sure about, but want to include in your diet. You can look them up here, and if it's something that is low in fermentable carbohydrates, you can incorporate it into your style of eating. And if it's moderate, you might try in very small amounts, but avoid those foods that are high. So the next step in the strategy, while we're starving the bacteria by continuing on the low FODMAP diet, is to expose them. Bacteria protect themselves by making a protective shield, known as a biofilm. A good example of a biofilm is a dental plaque. So if you've ever been to the dental hygienist and experienced them scraping the plaque off your teeth, then you've experienced or came to know a biofilm. That plaque was made by the bacteria living in your mouth. So we have those same types of biofilms made by the bacteria that live in our gut. So if we want to exterminate them or kill some of them off with antimicrobial products, it is really helpful to first use a product that breaks down the biofilm. So there are a few out there. The one that I like and have found to be most effective with my patients is called Interphase, and it's made by a company, SFI Health Therabiotic. You can follow the directions on the bottle in terms of how to take the product, but I'm going to give you a few suggestions first. First, you can just Google Interphase and you'll get to the Therabiotic website and you can purchase it from them. We highly recommend, though, that you start, just like with any supplement, with a very small amount and gradually increase to the recommended amount by the manufacturer. So here we're going to start with 1 cap of the Interphase between breakfast and lunch for 2 days. If you feel well and you don't suspect any negative side effects, which I don't think you will, you can then add a cap between lunch and dinner, again for 2 days. If you still don't suspect any negative effects, and again, I don't think you will, you can add another cap 2 hours after dinner. So basically, you're going to continue with this product while following the low FODMAP diet, taking 3 caps a day on an empty stomach. I'm suggesting between breakfast and lunch, and between lunch and dinner, and 2 hours after dinner. However, if you're an early riser, you may want to take it about an hour before breakfast, hour or two, and then between breakfast and between lunch and dinner, and then you don't need to take it again 2 hours after dinner. It just needs to be taken on an empty stomach, basically 2 hours before or after a meal, while following the low fermentable carbohydrate style of eating. Now, you may have tried an antibiotic prescribed to you for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, but it wasn't effective, or it wasn't effective for very long. That is likely because you were not using a biofilm disruptor, nor perhaps not following a low FODMAP diet. Those 2 aspects of the strategy are important to weaken and make the bacteria vulnerable. Okay, so now we've learned about the low FODMAP fermentable carbohydrate diet. We're taking the Interphase to expose the bacteria. Now we're going to use some herbal products to exterminate many of the unwanted bacteria. Now we're going to use strategies to exterminate the unwanted bacteria. We recommend using a combination of herbal products. Now, if you're under the care of a physician for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, as I mentioned, you may have been prescribed an antibiotic, and that could be quite helpful. I still, though, recommend typically that people follow the course of antibiotic with the antimicrobial herbal products I'm going to suggest, as well as the interface, and continuing the low fermentable carbohydrate diet. Following the antibiotic with the antimicrobial herbs can increase the benefit of both of them, as the bacteria in the gut are truly hard to kill off. Now, there are a variety of different herbal antimicrobials online. The ones that I have found to be most helpful, at least to start, I'm going to describe to you. You start to take them while continuing with the low FODMAP diet and the interface, taking the interface 3 times a day. Okay, so now we're going to start layering on the antimicrobials. So the first product I recommend that you try is by a company called Metagenics, and it's called Candibactin AR. You can start slowly, and ultimately you're going to follow the manufacturer's directions. I just suggest that rather than starting with that recommended amount right away, that you start slowly, and that you take 1 cap 15 minutes before breakfast for 2 days. If you don't suspect any negative effects, you can add 1 cap 15 minutes before lunch for 2 days. And if you don't suspect any negative effects, you can add 1 cap 15 minutes before dinner. Then you'll continue with 1 cap 3 times a day, 15 minutes before each meal. If you are again feeling well with the product, which I anticipate you will then add a second antimicrobial product. Now, at this point, there's a decision you need to make. If you are experiencing diarrhea as your primary symptom for the bacterial overgrowth or dysbiosis, or especially if you're not experiencing constipation. So if you don't have constipation, but you have other symptoms, then I'm going to suggest the second product be Metagenics Candibactin BR. Again, ultimately getting to the manufacturer's directions, but starting off slow. So while you're taking the interface 3 times a day and you're taking the Candibactin AR 3 times a day, you're going to add the Candibactin BR. For this one, I recommend you start 2 caps 15 minutes before breakfast for 2 days. If you don't suspect any negative effects, add 2 caps 15 minutes before dinner for 2 days. And if you don't suspect any negative effects, continue 2 caps 2 times a day, 15 minutes before breakfast and dinner. You can take the Candibactin AR and BR at the same time before your meals. If, however, you struggle with constipation, instead of the Candibactin BR as your second antimicrobial supplement, you're going to add a Trantil. So you'll continue with the interphase and the Candibactin AR, and then you'll add a Trantil. You'll start with 2 caps 15 minutes before breakfast for 2 days. If you don't suspect any negative effects, you're going to add 2 caps 15 minutes before lunch for 2 days. And if you don't suspect any negative effects, add 2 caps 15 minutes before dinner. And if you don't suspect any negative effects, you're going to continue 2 caps 3 times a day, 15 minutes before each meal, along with the Candibactin AR. You can take those 2 together 15 minutes before meals. And you will continue with the interface 3 times a day between meals, along with the FODMAP eating style. We do recommend that you make yourself a chart and set alarms on your phone to remind yourself to take the supplements at the appropriate times. I also suggest getting a pill box that helps you to remember if you've taken the supplement or not. Basically, you lay out your pills your supplements in the pill box at the beginning of each week. And then as the day goes by, you draw from that, and it helps you to remember if you've taken them or not, because it can get hard to remember and follow. So again, this is a complex routine and requires a lot of planning. You might be wondering how long you can stay on this plan. So we recommend 6 weeks, but not much longer than that. You don't want to stay on these antimicrobial products for an extensive amount of time. You may need to go back on them down the road, since creating a healthy microbiome takes time for some patients, meaning a year or so. But I just don't want you to stay on the antimicrobial herbal products for more than 6 weeks at a time. We need to take a break from that and get to some other strategies to help with your overall health. During this time, you may experience die-off symptoms. That's another reason to start the antimicrobials slow so that you gradually get used to these symptoms, or the die-off is a little bit more slow, which can be helpful for many people. These products, these antimicrobial products really work. They will kill the microbes, many of the microbes, specifically the bacteria. Then the bacterial fragments can actually cause some symptoms because they can get through the epithelial lining of the intestines. And as I mentioned, there's a big part of your immune system on the other side of your GI tract. So when we're struggling with gut health, our gut tends to be more permeable. Bacterial fragments from the dead bacteria can kind of seep across, and they could trigger the immune system because the immune system is surveilling, looking for anything foreign. Unfortunately, it's kind of a necessary process, although people experience this immune response to varying degrees, depending primarily on how permeable your gut is. So if you're someone who's experiencing the die-off symptoms such as brain fog, skin rashes, fatigue, and just generally not feeling great, you can try a binder. So one that I recommend is Biocidin Botanicals GI Detox. So again, the name of the company is Biocidin Botanicals, and it includes zeolite clay and activated charcoal. And just taking 1 cap at night before bed can help bind the bacterial die-off products and help you excrete them through a bowel movement. Now, if you are constipated and struggle with constipation, I don't recommend this product for you. First, I would recommend you check out Stepping Stone 3 for ideas to increase gut motility. If you do take the binder, it is really important to stay well hydrated and drink at least 8 to 10 cups of water a day. So after the extermination phase, we need to repopulate our gut microbiome. We have reduced the population of microbes, especially where they don't belong. Now, when we think about microbes populating our gut or living in our gut, remember they adhere to the lining of the GI tract. That's where they live. So when we exterminate them, we are exposing real estate along the GI tract. So as soon as you're done with the extermination phase, you want to get some of the good microbes back in there and give them a chance to take up some space along your GI tract. You want to repopulate your gut microbiome with them. Just do so a little carefully. We don't need to overdo it with high doses of probiotics, but we do want to take some steps to introduce healthy microbes into our GI tract. First, I'd recommend spending time in nature. There are microbes all around us in our environment that we have evolved with over time, and we want to increase our exposure to them. Another strategy to do this is playing with your pets or perhaps borrowing someone else's pet. That also contributes to increasing your exposure to microbes generally in our environment that we have evolved with and that are health promoting. Then you can include some fermented foods. Fermented foods have bacteria that are health promoting, so you can incorporate lactose-free yogurt or other fermented foods like kimchi or unpasteurized sauerkraut. The pasteurization process does kill off microbes. In the lactose-free yogurt, the microbes are added after the milk is pasteurized, so that's not a problem. You can then also consider a multi-strain probiotic supplement. I recommend taking a probiotic supplement that has many different strains of bacteria in it. And I suggest 3 days a week, maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Again, those microbes, are just trying to get them in there, but they should be starting to adhere to the gut lining and repopulating themselves. So you don't want to overdo it by high dose and high frequency of probiotics. Okay. Now, research really hasn't gotten to the point where we know exactly the right ratio of different types of microbial strains, right? And it probably varies by individual. So that's why we're using these different strategies to try to repopulate and looking for a multi-strain probiotic. The one I tend to recommend is made by Garden of Life, and it's called Doctor's Formulated Probiotic, and there's a version for men and a version for women. And again, I recommend 3 times a week, taking 1 cap of the probiotic while including fermented foods and spending time with pets and out in nature. So congratulations, you have learned how to effectively reduce or remove the harmful bacteria in your gut and taken steps to repopulate with healthy microbes. And this is your first step towards better gut health. We highly recommend you move on to stepping stone 2, really important to heal your gut. So we'll explore the gut structure and function and learn more about how bacterial dysbiosis or overgrowth can cause inflammation and gut permeability along the GI tract. It's important to address these issues before gradually adding high fermentable carbohydrate foods back into your diet, so that you can get to a healthier overall style of eating. However, if you do not first reduce the inflammation and the permeability and heal your gut, it's likely that you'll have continued symptoms. So you've worked so hard getting through the first phase, following the FODMAP diet and using the biofilm disruptor and antimicrobial herbs. So really important to get to the second stepping stone, to heal your gut and then take some strategies to carefully reintroduce those healthy foods that you were avoiding while following the low FODMAP diet. So again, congratulations on your work to date, and I look forward to working with you in Stepping Stone 2.